Hello, and welcome back to our podcast. I am Muhammad Alif Nasir Rahman with my name 123221184 with my friend.
And my name is Andres Nov Ramadan with student number 123221193. I am super excited to make this video.
Alright, so if you ever read Shakespeare or stumbled across the name Dante Alighieri, well, today we were diving into the word that gave birth to all of that. We're talking about Renaissance literature.
Sounds good. It's like fancy French word because it is and it literally means rebirth, and that's exactly what happened across art, culture, and literature in Europe from roughly the 14th to the 17th century.
Just imagine, after centuries of European life being dominated by rigid religious themes during the Middle Ages, suddenly this new wave hits. People start thinking about human beings, lived experience, and the real world around them. For that time, that was absolutely revolutionary.
And what's exciting is that this shift didn't just happen in painting or architecture, which we often hear about. Literature transformed completely too, and that transformation is exactly what we are unpacking today.
Alright, before we dive into the literature itself, we need to understand why the Renaissance happened in the first place. What made this era so unique?
Okay. This is where it gets really interesting. Hey James, the Renaissance didn't just appear out of thin air. There were a new massive historical events that acted as catalysts. Let's start with the most dramatic one, the falling of Constantinople in 1453.
Oh, this is such a pivotal moment. Constantinople was the capital of the Byzantine Empire, what we know now as Istanbul, Turkey. When the city fell to the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II, thousands of Greek scholars and intellectuals fled westward into Europe, particularly into Italy.
And they didn't flee empty-handed. They broke with the ancient manuscript texts of Greek and Roman psychology that had been almost forgotten in Western Europe for countries. Suddenly, people had direct access to Plato, Aristotle, Cairo starting from the south.
It's like finding a hard drive full of knowledge. Hard drive full of knowledge. Very good. And finally, being able to open every single file on it, the intellectual impact was enormous.
But there's another event that just as important, the invention of printing press by Johannes Gutenberg around 1440.
Now, this was a true game changer. Before the printing press, books were handwritten, which made them incredibly expensive and rare. Only the elite and the church had a real access to literature.
But after Gutenberg, book could be mass produced. Prints dropped dramatically. Merchant, craftsmen, and even some women from middle class background could now read and own books. Liturgy exploded across Europe.
And that directly fueled the growth of Renaissance literature. Writers suddenly had a much wider audience. Ideas could spread faster than ever before. It created a completely new intellectual ecosystem.
Exactly. And all of this unfolded over a relatively short period, roughly the 14th through the 17th century, making one of the most significant cultural transformations in human history.
It's incredible. When you think about it now, some of you might be wondering, what does all this historical context actually have to do with literature? What specifically changed in how people wrote and told stories?
Great question, and that's exactly what we are getting into next.
Okay, now we're getting to the heart of today's episode. What makes Renaissance literature distinct? What are its defining characteristics?
If I had sum it up, there are two major pillars: humanism and realism. Two concepts that sound simple on the surface but run incredible deep.
Let's start with humanism. What does that actually mean in this context?
So, humanism in the Renaissance was a philosophy that placed human beings at the center of everything. Not God, not the church, not the king, but human beings, with all their potential, achievement, and complexity.
There was a massive shift, especially when you remember that during the Middle Ages, nearly all art and literature existed to glorify God or serve the church. Suddenly, humanity itself becomes the main subject.
Absolutely. And Renaissance humanism also meant a passionate revival for interest in ancient Greek and Roman texts. Renaissance writers were obsessed with classical philosophy, poetry, and drama. They studied Jews' ancient work, then create something eternally new by blending classical wisdom with contemporary ideas.
So, it's like a remix, but a 15th century literary remix? Huh?
You could put it that way, but a very high quality remix. Now, the second pillar is realism. This is where literature begins portray everyday life, ordinary people, and the tales of the real world with remarkable precision.
And that was also revolutionary. In earlier periods, literature was dominated by mystical heroic tales, religious allegories, or legends with archetypal, almost larger than life characters.
But in the Renaissance, suddenly you are reading about a merchant struggling with debt or a young man falling in love against his family's wishes. It's deeply human. It's relatable even today, hundreds of years later.
And the character portrayal is so much deeper too. Renaissance literary figures have genuine flaws, contradictions, ambitions. They feel like real people, not just a symbol.
That combination of humanism and realism is exactly why Renaissance literature feels timeless. It's why this work are still studied and celebrated all over the world today.
Hmm, maybe including in school assignment.
Yeah,
Apparently, yeah.
of course, but definitely including those. But alright, now that we know the what, let's talk about the who, the extraordinary writers who made the Renaissance one of the greatest years in the literary history.
Okay, this is the section I've been waiting for. Wow, my God. Let's talk about the legendary writers of the Renaissance. Who is him? And we have to start with the biggest name of them all, William Shakespeare.
Okay. Who doesn't know Shakespeare, right? But here's the thing, a lot of people recognize the name but don't fully appreciate just how revolutionary he was for the English language and world literature as a whole.
Can you break down for us, Andres, about William Shakespeare?
Okay, I'll do it. Shakespeare was extraordinary because he worked in two major forms, drama and sonnet. And he excelled brilliantly at both. His plays from Hamlet, Macbeth, and Romeo and Juliet to A Midsummer Night's Dream all explore universal themes: love, betrayal, ambition, jealousy, and morality.
And a great character. And what makes him a true genius is how he portrayed character. Hamlet, for instance, isn't just a hero who hesitates. He's a deeply complex human being, full of internal conflict, philosophical doubt, and tragic self-awareness. We can still relate to Hamlet today because he was so genuinely human.
Exactly. And when it comes to his sonnets, Shakespeare's coined or first recovered over 1,700 words in English language that we still use today. Words like bedroom, lonely, generous, able, all traceable back to the Shakespeare work.
And here is a fun fact. Scholars estimate that Shakespeare coined or first recorded over 1,700 words in the English, all language that we still use today. Words like bedroom, lonely, generous, eyeball, all traceable back to Shakespeare works. Wow.
His influence on the English literature language is absolutely foundational. Alright? Let's move to Italy now. To Dante Alighieri.
Dante Alighieri, right? Dante! Now, he was a fascinating figure because he actually lived at the cusp of the Middle Ages and the early Renaissance with his masterwork. Wow! Without doubt, La Divina Commedia, or the Divine Comedy, became a crucial foundation for Renaissance literature.
Well, the Divine Comedy is a breathtaking epic poem. Dante narrates that journey of a soul himself through three realms: hell, purgatory, and heaven. Each realm has its own structure, its own population, and its own underlying psychology.
Sorry. Now, what made this revolutionary? Dante wrote in the Italian vernacular, in the everyday spoken language of the people rather than Latin. Latin, not Latin, Latin,
Yes.
which was the official language of literature and the church at the time.
That was an incredibly broad decision for his era, and the impact was profound. Dante essentially helped standardize modern Italian. He did for Italy what Shakespeare did for English. He shaped and elevated the national language through his art.
It's like the same person, isn't it? Dante and Shakespeare.
Yep.
Remarkable. And now the author, Geoffrey Cowker. what can we say? Joffrey, maybe Joffrey, whatever is that.
Yes.
He's from England. The man behind the Canterbury Tales.
Chaucer is a genuinely fascinating case. The Canterbury Tales is a collection of stories told by a group of pilgrims on their journey to Canterbury, Caredito. I'm so sorry, Caredito maybe. Each pilgrim from very differently social backgrounds tells their own tale.
So, it's essentially an anthology with a brilliant framing device. And through these diverse characters, from the knights and clergy, to merchants and commoners' council, painted an extraordinarily vivid portrait of 14th century English society.
And the range within the collection is stunning romance, tragedy, comedy, bawdy humor, sub-social satire. Chaucer wasn't just telling stories, he was simultaneously celebrating and circuiting the full spectrum. The full spectrum.
These three writers are remarkable. That's it.
Why you laugh?
This is very fun. This is very fun. And what's striking is that even though they came from different countries and slightly different eras, all their works share the same fundamental thread: an authentic, profound focus on human experience. Alright, let's talk about genres now. It was so very fun in here. The Renaissance was incredibly rich in literary forms. What were the main ones addressed?
Okay, there are two big categories: poetry and drama. Let's start with the poetry. The most dominant form here was the sonnet, right?
Yes.
A 14-line poem with a tightly structured rhyme scheme.
Alright.
Why you look so excited?
No.
No.
Because
of
it's
what?
very fun. You know about the Renaissance. We never seen Renaissance literature in
Yeah.
literature.
This is so fun for talking, yes?
Yes, because we see
Discuss.
we know Renaissance maybe from YouTube, not about we read it in the books, right?
Right.
Because
You're right.
you know we are the Gen Z, right?
See, okay.
We're so lazy and we about read no big no because YouTube.
Because
Alright, back to the topic. The sonnet became like the gold standard of Renaissance poetry, right?
yeah,
Why did this particular form become so popular?
because its strict structure actually challenged readers to be expansive within its contrast. Imagine trying to capture incredibly complex emotions, love, grief, the beauty of nature in exactly 14 lines with a specific rhyme patterns that require an extremely high level of craft.
And the results were often strikingly beautiful, dense with meaning, technically precise, yet deeply emotional. Beyond the sonnet, there were also epic poems, right?
Right. Epic poetry continued the tradition of ancient Greek and Roman works, long from the narrative about heroes, war, or great journeys, but infused with Renaissance themes. So you get this fascinating blend of classical wisdom and the new intellectual spirit of the age.
And on the drum side,
And the drum side, Renaissance drama divided into two main forms: tragedy and comedy. Renaissance tragedies were deep exploration of human weakness, pride, ambition, revenge that ultimately led to destruction and downfall. Hamlet, Macbeth, hostilities are the quintennial Renaissance strategies.
And comedy, this is my personal favorite. That's why I always looking because the comedy.
Yeah, you're right.
What can we say about receh in English?
Receh, what? It's joke?
No, we say about this is your humor is so receh. What we say receh in English?
Cheap. I don't know.
Cheap, maybe maybe something like that. To truly appreciate how radical the Renaissance was, we should compare it with what came before. The Middle Ages. What are the most striking differences, Andres?
The first and the most fundamental differences is thematic. Medieval literature was overwhelmingly dominated by religious and moral themes. The afterlife depiction. The God, the struggle against sins.
Where's the Renaissance?
God. Completely flipping that perspective. Suddenly, life on the earth became fascinating and worth celebrating. Romantic love, political ambition, natural beauty, intellectual achievement, all of these become legitimate and worthy subjects for serious literature.
And there was also a massive shift in language, right? During the Middle Ages, serious literature was written in Latin, accessible only to the educated elite and the clergy.
Of course, the Renaissance broke what scholars call vernacularization, writing in the everyday language of ordinary people. Dante used Italian, Chaucer used Middle English, Spanish readers used Spanish. This wasn't accidental, was an ideological choice that demonstrated access to literature.
That's such a powerful idea.
Yeah.
What about the influence of the Renaissance on modern literature? Because I'm sure we still feel it today.
You're right. Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
The narrative structure we take for granted today, deep character development, plot driven by internal psychological conflict, the exploration of moral ambiguity, all of that has its root in the Renaissance tradition.
And in education, the focus on the Renaissance and classical texts remains a cornerstone of humanities curricula around the world, doesn't it?
It does. And that's precisely why the Renaissance isn't just old history we study out of obligation. It is a very foundational how we tell stories, how we think about ourselves, and how we understand what it means to be human.
Wow, time really flies. 23 minutes.
Yep.
We have covered so much ground today. The historical context, the defining characteristics, the major authors, the genres, and how the Renaissance compares to what came before it.
And if I had to leave, maybe because the time is very
And the smell is very, very stinky.
because around here is someone pooping.
No, not someone. There was
Maybe
a cat.
cats or maybe you.
No. Crazy, yeah. Alright, so thank you everyone for everything, for hearing us, of course.
Thank you for watching these videos.
Yes,
Thank you for hearing us.
hearing our podcast about Renaissance literature, wasn't it?
Yes, Renaissance.
We are.
This is a very interesting topic.
Yes, and thank you.
Thank you.